Marcus Daniels woke before dawn like he did every day. The small apartment above the boat repair shop smelled like old oil, instant coffee, and the faint sweetness of his daughter's school uniform hanging to dry. He had a beat-up van parked outside with a dented bumper and a faded sticker that said, "Fixing what others toss." Marcus didn't mind the sticker. It told the truth. He had learned to fix things that others gave up. Own old motors, broken radios, and lately yachts. And expensive boats, when he could get the call. The money was never much, but it kept his little world moving. His daughter Alia was 12 and smart. She was the reason he stayed up late studying and early mornings tightening bolts. She loved science, especially oceans, and she believed in stories where people got better chances. Marcus wanted to give her more than stories. He wanted to give her a life where she did not worry about whether the lights would stay on, or if dinner would be enough. The call came in mid-morning. The yacht was not in his usual neighborhood. It was in the fancy harbor across town, where the docks were clean as if someone had washed the salt out of the air. The boat that needed help was a massive yacht with a polished deck that flashed. In the sunlight, people on the dock wore tailored clothes, and the smell of expensive perfume hung in the air. Marcus's heart beat fast, not from fear, but from the same rhythm he had when starting a tough job. He loaded his small toolkit into the van, tucked a worn notebook with his engineering notes under the seat, took his daughter's little backpack that was always in the van for when she needed to come with him. Today she was at school, so he would go alone. Still, he shoved one of her small drawings into his jacket pocket. She had drawn a big ship with a big heart below the water, and she had written, "The real strength is what you can't see." When he arrived, two dockhands in clean uniforms watched him as he climbed out of his van. His clothes were simple: a faded shirt showing oil stains, pants worn thin at the knees, and a cap that had seen better days. His tools rattled in a bucket, like a small storm in his hand. A nearby woman in a sharp dress, dark sunglasses, and a group of people around her stood near the yacht stairway. Her hair was perfect, her nails carefully done. She held a glass of something cold and looked over the dock with the confidence of someone used to people moving for her. That was Marissa Vale. Her name was already in the papers, sometimes philanthropist, investor-style icon. She had a mission today, wearing a white outfit that matched the yacht's bright shine. She had charity events, cameras, and the world watching. She was used to getting help fast and perfect. One of the dock managers walked over and nodded to Ward. "Marcus, this is the man from the call," the manager said quietly. "He says he can take a look. He's a single dad, does a lot of good work. He's got experience with old engines. This might be the kind of mind that can find what others missed." Marissa turned, saw Marcus, and her lips curved into a small smile, the way someone smiles when they have already decided the answer. "That's him?" she said, loud enough so the people around heard. "He looks like he works on fishing boats." "Not my yacht." Her voice had the smooth edge of privilege. "I need this fixed fast. I don't want stories." "Can he do it? Or should I call someone who dresses for the job?" Her friends laughed lightly. The manager tried to soften the moment, but Marcus heard it all. Felt the weight of her eyes and the quiet murmur that followed. She didn't know him, but she already had a box for him in her mind. He could have walked away, could have pointed out the difference in their worlds and left. But the picture in his pocket of the ship with a heart reminded him of Alia's words. He was hired to fix the problem, and this was his work. He gave a small nod, lifted his bucket, and walked up the steps to the massive yacht. The yacht's entrance was like stepping into another world. A soft carpet, polished rails, and a crew watching him. They wore crisp uniforms and had expressions that said they were used to being in the shadow of someone like Marissa. Marcus introduced himself calmly, keeping his voice even. "I'm Marcus. Daniels, I got the call about the electrical issue. I'll start below and see what's going on." One crew member gave him a skeptical look, the kind that measured a person by their clothes. Marcus returned a respectful nod and stepped down into the engine room. The inside was big, with complicated systems and wires that tangled like roots of a tree. The engine's glow was quiet, but he saw the tiny signs that spoke to him. A dead readout panel, a smell of burned plastic in the corner, and a sensor array that flickered like a tired heartbeat. He lifted the engine cover and got to work. He had no fancy parts here, no extra staff, and nobody watching his every move. The yacht's official engineers had been told to wait for a new part shipment weeks away, and the cost was going to be high. They had written it off as something that needed time and money. Marcus saw a different story. He pulled out wires from older systems, tested circuits with his old meter, and used small pieces he had gathered from other broken equipment. He worked with a quiet focus so deep it felt like meditation, he thought. Of Aaliyah waiting for him at home, of the tuition bill that needed a little extra, and of the nights he spent reading through manuals while the world around him slept. The real challenge was not the damage itself. It was making the systems trust the new connections. He had to balance the power flow, adjust the sensor calibrations, and trick the old software into accepting the repaired links without showing an error. He used a small tool he'd built from parts of a broken marine radio to simulate the yacht's original signal. He whispered under his breath, like naming a ship before it sails, "Come on, show me you can run." Above deck, he heard the hum of life-continuing laughter, voices talking about the event, and Marissa's soft tone giving instructions. He kept working. The crew came down once, curious, and saw an oil-stained man in a dark corner. One of them asked quietly, "You sure that will hold?" Marcus didn't shrug or boast. He looked up with earnest eyes and said, "I've seen worse and made it work. Just give me a minute." He didn't need their approval. He needed the engines to roar again. For him, the boat wasn't about the fancy drink on the deck or the people watching. It was about the same feeling he got when he fixed the old generator at the community center after a storm. It was about trust between him and the machine, between him and his own hands. As he tightened the last connection and set the sensor array to the right threshold, a tiny light blinked on. One readout screen that had been black flickered, then another. The old system woke up like a person from sleep. The hum changed to deeper, stronger rhythm filled the room. Marcus tested the main engine. It responded smooth now, like a piano that had been out of tune and finally tuned right. He watched the display. No error codes. The electrical flow was steady. He breathed out just a little. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was stable and safe. He did one last sweep, making sure nothing would cause a shock from the sudden power change. He wiped his hands on a rag and, without calling attention to himself, started closing the panels. He could have fixed it and walked away. He could have left quietly, letting the story stay in the dark. But the moment had already been shaped by the laugh from earlier. He remembered the way Marissa's group had looked at him like he did not belong. He thought of Alia's drawing again, and the part where she colored the heart under the boat. He didn't want to be a headline or a staged smile. He wanted to do his job and go home with his head held straight. He climbed up. The yacht's door opened like it had a secret to share. Marissa was there, already in motion, speaking to someone on her phone. Shh. She looked at him again. This time, the surprise crossed her face for a second. She saw the calm in him. Not the swagger of a fake expert, but the quiet ownership of someone who knew his work. She didn't say anything. The moment hung between them. The crew came in. After him, checking the systems, and they found the engines running fine. A junior engineer muttered, "How did this happen so fast?" The manager downstairs was already on his phone. Checking the return times, Marcus gave a small, polite nod to Marissa and said, "The systems are stable. I fixed that sensor array and rewired the feed. You should be good to go." Her smile was smaller now, the laugh from before gone. She didn't ask for details. She didn't offer thanks right away. The power was back under her feet, and everything appeared smooth to her world. Marcus packed his tools, lifted the bucket, and turned to go. He didn't need her approval to leave. The job was done. He walked down the dock with the same quiet rhythm he had when he arrived. As he drove back through the city, the neighborhood changed slowly from polished marble to cracked pavement. From the yachts to the small fishing boats and old shops, he stopped at the small market and picked up the canned soup Aaliyah liked, plus a small treat she didn't expect. He pulled the drawing from his jacket and smoothed it. He texted her a picture. "Fixed a big boat today. You draw the heart." I make it work. Her reply came back quick with a string of hearts and the words, "Daddy, I knew you would." He didn't tell her about the laugh. He didn't need to. The real story was not what she saw. It was what he kept inside a quiet. Proof that he could walk into a place where people made quick judgments and still leave with the work done. After the yacht left the harbor for Marissa Vale's big event, Marcus stayed behind below the deck. The polished wood and champagne glasses above did not touch his world. Down in the engine room, the air smelled like hot metal and old wires. The quiet was heavy, broken only by the slight buzz of the system still waking up after his fix. He could hear the distant sound of laughter and clinking glass from above. The kind of noise that reminded him how far apart the two worlds felt, but right now, those sounds were background. His full attention was on making sure the yacht stayed alive, not just for a moment, but for the hours ahead. He had told himself earlier that he would not be looking for praise. That idea still sat in his chest like a small stone. What he did want was something deeper, proof to himself that his knowledge could hold up under pressure, that the sacrifices, the late-night studying, the extra shifts all had weight. In the engine room, systems hid in layers. The official crew had seen the problem as a big part that failed. They had told Marissa it needed a new sensor array, a part that would take days and a lot of money. Marcus saw the pieces differently. He saw the small failures that made the big failures seem huge. He saw the cuts and cracks under the shiny surface, how a tiny adjustment could change the whole rhythm. He stepped back into the engine space. Sitting on the cold floor like he had done before, with old boat engines in the neighborhood. Ran his hand over the panel again, listening with his fingertips. The sensor array had been knocked out by a small surge days ago, a ripple that should have triggered a warning but had been ignored. That warning system had a hole one he could patch. He pulled out his tester, and the readouts flickered, showing the real story. The wire feeding the array had heat damage in a hidden spot. The main relay was working, but it sent unstable current to the sensors. The software had blacklisted signals that didn't match its expected timing, so the yacht's system thought the array was dead. The report given to Marissa's team was a lie of convenience. Buy the new expensive piece. Wait for delivery and keep the public calm. Marcus didn't have that time or the money either. He had to work with what he had. He took apart the old relay and cleaned the contacts with a small brush he kept for tough jobs. He wrapped thin copper from a broken cable around the weak wire section, like sewing a tiny wound. He used the old circuit board from a retired boat radio to build a small stabilizer. It was not pretty. It was patched in a way that most engineers with polished degrees would have frowned at. But it worked because Marcus knew how the system breathed. He created a small signal mimic something that would speak to the main computer in its own language, telling it, "I'm here, I work, trust me." He gently adjusted the timing so the yacht's software would accept the signal without throwing errors. As he did this work, thought about the first time he learned to read a wiring diagram. His own father had died when Marcus was a kid, leaving behind a toolbox and one piece of advice: learn how the pieces talk. When you listen, they tell you what's wrong. Marcus had kept that voice in his mind. The idea that the world had to shout to be heard was false. Sometimes it whispered, and only someone who paid attention could hear the truth. He remembered how Alia asked him once, "Why do some people only look at the shiny part?" He had told her, "Because looking deeper takes time. And time is something people with money think they can buy. But you can't buy understanding." He tightened one connection, then the next, gently breathing as if he was handling a living thing. The stabilizer he made hummed softly like a small heart waking from sleep. Yacht's main system began to listen. A faint light blinked on the console, then another, and the old error codes slowly cleared from the display. Marcus didn't celebrate, just kept working, making sure nothing would slip back. He set a small fail-safe. The power surged suddenly. The system would cut off, not fry. He didn't want a quick fix that burned out in front of the very person who had laughed. The crew above had not expected the problem to be this deep. They were used to calling in outside specialists and waiting for parts. Marcus had seen the shift in how they moved when the stabilizer kicked in. One younger crew member came down again. "The readings are changing," she whispered, leaning close to the open panel. I thought it was the new replacement part. How did you do that? Marcus looked up, tired but steady. I didn't replace anything. I just helped it speak right. She nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but she felt something real. The older engineer who had the loud voice about following the book came down to. He had written the original report about the failed array. He stood with his arms crossed, watching Marcus work like someone watching a quiet storm. You're using parts from old systems, the engineer said with that tone that sounded like a test. That's not standard. It might not last. Marcus didn't get defensive. He didn't need to. He leaned forward, showing the clean lines and secure connections. It's stable for now. I made a backup. If something shifts, it cuts out, before it damages anything. I can give you the design if you want to make it permanent with proper materials. The engineer stared at the work, then at the reading. The system was clean. The error had gone. He grunted in a way that was the closest to respect he had offered. Marcus didn't wait for praise. Continued double-checking everything, adjusting the threshold so Marissa's yacht would feel like a smooth ride, not a patched one. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't look. He had layers of focus now, the kind that makes the world outside fade. He could hear the soft shout from the deck, someone saying the schedule was slipping. The pressure was building above. Cameras, planning, and the expectation that the luxury experience would not fail. Marcus kept breathing slow and deep, letting the machine settle. He replaced a burned fuse with one he had reshaped from a spare. He added a small note inside the access panel, written in tiny permanent marker, fixed by hands that care. Don't forget to check the stabilizer every week. It was a small, private message to himself, sign that he had been there and that the system could survive beyond the day. Once he was sure the yacht's core systems were stable, he moved to the secondary ones, the ones no one talked about, unless they failed. The backup pumps, the temperature monitors, the emergency lights. He used the same silent energy, listening to each one. When he rerouted a line to avoid a weak joint and added a small capacitor to smooth voltage spikes, he thought about how many times he had watched people take easy shortcuts that broke later. He didn't want this to break. He wanted a quiet strength that could survive the weight of gossip, the vibration of waves, and the sudden demand of a social media post where the yacht was the star. He worked longer than he planned. The sun had moved, and the light through the small engine windows had shifted from bright to soft. The yacht above was now moving closer to where it would host the big Aventa test run to make sure everything held. He finished with the last check and powered down the test sequence to let the systems run in real time. He sat back a little, rubbing the sore spot in his lower back. His hands were stained with oil and the tiny cuts that came from hard work. He wiped them slowly on a rag, then folded the rag and set it aside. He looked around the room. The systems hummed with a steady breath. No alarms, no warnings. The yacht was safe. He could have left. He could have called it done and gone home. That was the easy path. He had a rule: do the work, walk away clean. He had followed it most times. But something in the silence of the engine room made him stay a few more minutes. He wanted to make sure that if something went wrong with the public showing, it wouldn't be because of a cut corner. He tightened one last bolt, opened the panel lid just enough, and set the manual back up to monitor quietly in case the software failed to notice a sudden change. Then he closed it for good. Up on the deck, the party sounds grew louder. He could hear a different kind of voice, no Marissa, speaking in a calm, confident way, and someone saying that everything was ready. Marcus packed his tools slowly, placing each piece back in order. He didn't want to leave a mess. He meant to leave no trace that would create a story that wasn't his to control. He slid the small signal mimic device into a cloth and tucked it behind the panel cover where no one would see. It was a piece of his secret proof that the fight had been thoughtful, not lucky. Before climbing back up, he took a breath and looked at the little drawing Aaliyah had made taped to the inside of his notebook. The ship with the heart glowed. In the dim space of his mind, he touched the corner of the paper like a silent thank you. Then he climbed the ladder, carrying the quiet weight of what he had done. He was still the same Marcus Daniels who had come in with tired hands and a small backpack. The real change lived under the deck, humming steady, waiting to show itself when Marissa returned. The yacht cut through the harbor slowly. All eyes above deck on the schedule, and the camera set to catch Marissa Vale's arrival at the gala. Her team had smoothed the invitations, checked the guest lists, and rehearsed her smile. She was calm, the kind of calm that comes from control. The yacht was a symbol of that control. It had to work. It was part of her image, bright, flawless, and moving without trouble. Everything depended on the machine below keeping that promise. Then, without warning, the yacht shuddered. Just a small pause in the engine's smooth sound, like a deep breath held too long. Marissa felt it in her chair and straightened. Her assistant's smile tightened. "What is that?" someone whispered, and the word went up to her ears. Yacht slowed, then stopped. The silence in its wake loud as a siren. Crew members began moving fast, radioing back and forth. The event's timing hung above them like a shadow. Marissa stood up, the easy grace gone from her posture. Her eyes narrowed. "Get me the engine room now." Her voice had a sharp edge, the kind that made people scramble. Marcus felt the small change first. He was below, doing a quiet sweep of the systems, checking the secondary pumps again, making sure the backup would kick in if anything tripped. The soft humming of the yacht's heart was steady, but then a small flicker of instability flashed across the secondary monitor. Tiny signal drop. The built-in failsafe had kicked in, cutting a small part of the system to prevent damage. It was the kind of thing he had designed the night before in his mind, the part most people would never see because it would hide the deeper problem. He didn't panic, moved fast, pulling up the main control interface and watching the flow. The primary engine was still running, but one of the old manual relays had softened under pressure. It wasn't a full failure. It was the system asking for help without crying out. Marcus slid open the panel, adjusted the relay's tension, and reset the backup line to pick up the load. He used the little stabilizer he had built to smooth the dip so it didn't show as a big fault to the main system. The hum returned, stronger, like someone finally exhaling. He looked up at the ladder, expecting the crew to come down and see the fix, maybe to say thanks. The ladder didn't move. He heard voices above, rising in nervous tones. He knew it was more than a small pause. He could feel the weight of the moment from the way the yacht had stopped. The crew flooded into the engine room. The older engineer, who had questioned him before, was there, lips pressed tight. The junior crew member's eyes widened, seeing the system's stable output. The man with the big voice looked at Marcus and then at the clean readings. He opened his mouth, then closed. The noise of people moving above, was now a kind of pressure pushing through the floorboards. Marcus didn't say anything. He had his hands on the panel, making sure things stayed calm. He could have quietly called the situation fixed and let someone else carry the story up. He didn't. He had learned in his life that when a machine sent a small warning, ignoring it and moving on could lead to a bigger break later. He tightened the last connection and gave the system a gentle push so it would report clean status. The ladder creaked as Marissa came down, flanked by her assistant and one of her public relations staff. She had the kind of face that did not often show surprise, but now the edge of tension showed. The room smelled like hot metal and pressure. She looked at the crew, then at Marcus, who stood with his hands steady on the open panel. He had grease on his fingers, a small line of sweat at his temple, and the quiet look of someone doing a job that had weight. She had come expecting blame, maybe excuses, maybe a man who had failed to fix what was easy to fix. Instead, the engine was humming like nothing had happened. The readings were clean. The older engineer shifted his weight, the kind of movement that was almost a silent admission. Something happened, and it worked. "What did you do?" Marissa asked, but it was not a question filled with curiosity. It was a challenge wrapped in the thin cloth of her voice. This was supposed to be a small fix. "I was told it would be ready. Now we stopped, and people are watching." Her gaze stayed on Marcus. She did not soften it. The laugh from the earlier moment, the one she had used to dismiss him, was still under the surface of her posture. He could have braced himself, could have spoken up with a quick, sharp explanation, or stayed silent and let the crew take the heat. He stood up a little straighter, wiped his hands carefully on a rag, and said, "The system had a small dip in the old relay. It cut a secondary line to protect the main engine. I adjusted the tension, smoothed the signal, and the core is stable. The failsafe did its job. It stopped like it was supposed to, so the big part wouldn't break. Everything is back to normal. His voice was clear, steady. Without apology and without asking for praise, Maurice's eyes flicked briefly to the older engineer, then back to Marcus. "So it was not the big part you said needed replacing?" she asked, letting there be a little sharpness in the question, as if she expected him to say it was more complicated or that she owed something. Marcus shook his head gently. "No, the big part was fine. The warning came from a small section that was being protected. The system was working as it should. I just helped it talk without sounding the alarm too loud." The assistant next, to her, looked confused. The PR person was already thinking about how this moment could be turned into a story. Marissa kept her face controlled, the kind of control that had been built like armor. She had been someone who got her way because others believed her image before her words. Now the image in front of her was something she had not planned. A quiet silence fell. The crew looked at each other, then at her. Marcus stood there, not larger than the room, but steady, like the engine beneath his hands. He had not made a big show, he had not made a speech. He had done the work, and now the machine ran clean and strong. The turning point was not in the words. It was in the way Maurice's eyes, for just a second, paused on the small line of grease on his fingers. The way she saw the truth in his calm, and the way she felt the shift from what she expected to. What had happened? She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a moment, she was the woman who could dismiss someone with a look and move on. Then something inside shifted. She was used to winning by design, by plan, by the polished version of herself. This moment didn't have a plan. It didn't have a script. It had a man who stepped into a place where she had already decided his value, and he was holding up the thing she needed without drama. Her pride wanted to cut it down. Her curiosity, quieter and newer, wanted to understand. She chose the quiet weight of truth. "Good," she said finally, her voice controlled but softer now. "Make sure it stays that way. I don't want another." "Stop." She did not say thank you. She didn't have to. The engines were running. The public image was safe. She turned slightly, as if to move back up, then paused again. "What do you need to keep it that way?" she asked, not in the same tone as before. It was not the question of someone giving an order. It was the question of someone who saw that her own world had a blind spot she had not paid for yet. Marcus looked at her, surprised just enough so it almost showed, but not too much. He could have named the list of things, better parts, regular access, a recommendation that would help him get contracts. Instead, he thought of Aaliyah's drawing again, the heart beneath the ship, and the way she believed in quiet strength. He held his answer steady. "I need the chance to do more than this one fix. I need a referral reel work where people don't just look at the outside. I need support for the certification I'm working toward. I want to build something for others like me, not just myself. If you want this to stay good, help me give other people the chance to learn what's under the surface." He didn't ask for a staged photo or a line on her next public piece. He asked for something that could reach deeper. She studied him. The room held its breath. The crew pretended not to watch, but every face had shifted slightly. Marissa had many options. She could offer a simple thank you, a small gift, then move on. She could take this moment and shape it into a public story, one where she was the generous one who found a local hero. Or she could do something harder, something quiet that didn't make her look better on paper, but better in truth. The gap between pride and choosing was thin. She stepped across. "Give me your card," she said. Her voice had the weight now of someone who had made a decision. "I'll have my people reach out. Not for a photo, for real work. And I want to hear your idea about that program. Bring me something detailed." Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out the folded scrap of paper where his contact info was written in his own careful handwriting, and handed it to her. She took it, then paused and added, "And next time, don't let them laugh before they see it wasn't an apology." It was a line that carried both the sting of the earlier moment and the opening toward Something new. Marcus nodded, not making it into drama or a statement. He kept his calm. Marissa turned and walked back. Up. The crew followed, their steps quick, their faces carrying the quiet weight of the moment they had all seen. Marcus watched her leave, then turned to finish closing the panels. He didn't know yet how much the promise would matter, he'd asked, and she had answered in a way that did not erase what had happened, but began to build a bridge. He felt the shift. The moment after Marissa turned and walked away, the engine room felt both heavier and lighter at the same time. The crew followed her up, whispering in low tones, their faces a mix of surprise, curiosity, the kind of silence that comes after something unexpected happens. Marcus stayed where he was, finishing the last few checks, but his mind was working ahead. He had asked for something real, and she had not offered a staged picture or a quick applause. She had asked for details and had told him to bring her. A plan that was more than most would give. It was a door. He didn't know yet how wide it would open. Above, the yacht restarted its slow movement toward the gala location. People on the deck were smoothing ties, fixing dresses, and pretending the earlier pause had been a smooth part of the show. Marissa didn't speak loudly about what happened. Her public relations team wanted to talk about the yacht's flawless recovery, the unexpected hero moment, the kind of story they could turn into a polished caption for social media. She let them stew for a few minutes, then stepped aside. She didn't want the story shaped the easy way. She wanted something real. But she also knew that the world she lived in expected details and proof. So she did what she had learned to do over the years. She used the shape of her influence. But she tried also to soften the sharp edges, so the change would not look like a performance. Marcus packed up the last of his tools. He left no scrap, no sign that he had been more than a quiet worker who cared. He took his small note out from behind the panel, the one that said the stabilizer needed weekly checks, and tucked it back into the access slot. A small piece of himself hidden in plain sight. Then he climbed the ladder. On the way up, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. The hunger in the air from people watching. The small shift from being invisible to being something noticed, and the responsibility of what he'd already started. He stepped out, giving a polite nod to the crew, then walked to the dock. The sea breeze touched his face and carried the faint sound of the event starting. The clink of glasses and low polite laughter building like a cloud. He didn't go right. A way to get the materials for the program he wanted to build. First, he had to do something simple. He had to go home. The night he had worked on the yacht had already started to feel like the day the door had cracked open. And he wanted to sit with Alia, hear her voice, and let her tell him what she had learned in science class. He wanted to hold that quiet victory with her, not the story others might try to make of it. He drove slowly through the city, the same streets that had felt heavy in the morning, now lighter, with the small possibility of change. That evening, Leah came home from school with a new idea about how to explain pressure in water. Listened, laughing quietly when she used her hands to show how waves push and pull. He asked her questions, and she asked him about the big boat. He didn't give her everything. He didn't tell her about the moment the yacht had stopped or how the rich woman had looked when she realized she was wrong. He kept it simple. I helped a big boat today. It had a small problem, and I fixed it. I want to help more people. Do the same. She placed her hand on his arm and said, Daddy, you make everything stronger. I want to help them too. He looked down at her, surprised by how clear she was. Then we'll figure it out together, he said. The next day, Marcus sat with a clean sheet of paper on the kitchen table, a small lamp lighting the edges. He wrote out his idea in a way that would make sense to someone who had a big world, but maybe did not know the small one well. He called it the Hidden Hands Program. He wrote that the people who fixed things and kept systems running were often invisible. They did not have a place to learn real skills, because most training required money they didn't have, or connections they could not get. He wrote that if someone like Marissa could help open the door, providing referrals to real clients, helping with the cost of a certification test, and creating a small local space where trainees could practice, then a few men and women in his neighborhood could learn, earn trust, and build better lives. He included a list, what tools were needed, what a basic monthly support plan looked like, and how people who finished could help each other. He folded the paper, placed it inside a small folder, and wrote a short note on the outside. Real chance. No photo needed. Details inside. Went to the harbor again, carrying the folder like it was part of him. The yacht was still docked, but the crowd had shifted from excitement to casual motion. He found a quiet place where the crew's paths crossed with her assistant's route. He watched for a moment, and then, when the assistant was alone, he approached. "I have the details she asked for," he said softly, holding the folder out. The assistant looked at him, and for a second, the memory of the earlier doubts flickered across her face. Then she remembered the look Marissa had when she had taken his card. She took the folder. "I'll give this to her," she said, and her tone held a little more weight than before. "She wants something real." Marcus nodded and turned away. He didn't follow. He knew the part about letting things work needed some space. He didn't push. He trusted that the door she had opened would not close easily, now that he had placed something solid in it. Days passed. There was no immediate headline. There was no sudden invitation on his phone. He continued doing the usual work small boat engines. A few local repairs and night classes where he studied the advanced parts of marine systems. The waiting was not easy. He thought about the moment in the engine room when she had said, "Give me your card," and the way she had added, "Don't let them laugh before they see." That sentence lived in his mind like a warning and a promise. He didn't know if she would follow through, but he also knew she had a way of making chances stick when she chose to. The real test was not if she reached out fast. It was if she built what he had asked for without making it into a show. One afternoon, a message arrived. It wasn't a call with a large team or a glossy invitation. It was a simple email from a name he recognized through the signature. Woman from Marissa's network who handled small project vetting. The subject line read, "Follow-up hidden. Hands program." Inside, a short note said, "Marissa asked me to review your proposal. She wants to meet with you to talk about how you imagine the training working and to see what support you need to start. Can you come by her office tomorrow at noon?" Marcus sat still for a long moment. He read the email again, felt the weight of the choice he had made the day he went down into the engine room when he could have just fixed the problem, left quietly, and taken the money. Instead, he had asked for something deeper. He placed his hand flat on the table, feeling the grain of the wood, and answered back with a simple, clear reply, "Yes, I'll be there." The next day, he dressed carefully, chose a clean shirt, the best he had, not to impress, but to show respect. He had the folder with the plan in it, updated with notes from the night before, things he had thought of. In the quiet hours about how to protect the people who would join the program from being taken advantage of, he drove to the place Marissa worked. The building was shiny, but the people in the lobby were quiet and human. He was led into a small meeting room. The woman from the email was there, and she had another person with her, a man who handled outreach for a few of Marissa's projects. They were polite, open, but their eyes watched him the way people watch someone trying to explain something important. He did not start by talking about the yacht, or the moment when she had stood there. He started with the program and the small list of how the first few months could run. He spoke slow, using words that would be clear to someone outside his world, but careful not to lose the simple hunger of the idea. He talked about apprenticeships that did not have heavy fees, mentoring from people who had real experience, and how those who graduated could help the next group. He showed them the tools list, the schedule, and the idea of a small scholarship fund that could be matched by other local partners. He explained that trust had to be earned by the people in his neighborhood, that someone like Marissa making an introduction would give them the beginning of that trust. They listened. They asked questions, good ones, that showed they were thinking how to make it sustainable, not just a moment. The man in the room leaned forward and said, "This could work. If we help you start with a small group, commit to coaching the first instructors, and then watch as those people bring others, the ripple could be real." The woman added, "Marissa asked for something honest. She doesn't want a public line about saving the day. She wants you to have tools to build what you wrote." Marcus felt the air shift again. It wasn't the same pressure as before. Was the weight of a choice becoming action? They made a plan. They agreed to fund the first certification tests for 3 people Marcus would recommend. They would help with a small toolkit. They asked him to write a short guide for the first apprentices, to help them understand the basics and the rules of trust. He left with a small packet of support letters, a date to start the first meeting, and a quiet understanding that the boat that had once been a symbol of separate worlds now carried a bridge. He walked out into the sunlight, carrying the folder. That had become more than paper. He didn't rush home. He drove slowly, thinking of how the small crack in the wall had gurr. Months passed and the quiet change grew its own life. His days stayed full. He still repaired small engines, helped neighbors with broken pumps, and went to night classes to sharpen what he already knew. Now there was more behind him. Something that pulled him forward. The Hidden Hands program started with 3 men Marcus had chosen. They came from the same streets, the same worries, and the same quiet hunger to make their hands matter. Marcus taught them the simple way he had learned. Listen to the machine. Don't rush the fix, and treat every part like it has a story. He made sure they each had a small, honest toolkit, the first real professional gear many of them had ever owned. The letters from Marissa's people hung on a wall in the small community space. Not framed in gold, just pinned with simple pushpins. They were proof that something outside their neighborhood had seen the value and had not turned it into a show. The first group learned more than how to solder wires or adjust relays. Marcus built into them the idea that the real repair was often the trust you earned when you showed up and did the job, even when no one watched. He told them about the Yacht story without naming Marissa first. He said how a man had fixed a big problem with small pieces, how the loud voice above had expected failure, and how the quiet work had changed something bigger than a machine. He didn't tell them to expect miracles from rich people. He taught them to ask clearly for what they needed to bring real plans, and to hold their own value when someone tried to put them in a box. They practiced on old engines, then on small community projects. Word spread slowly, the way good work does when people see a light last longer than a flicker. Olea watched all of it from her own quiet place. She came sometimes with a notebook, drawing diagrams and writing notes in her own mix of science and stories. She would sit beside Marcus while he corrected a student's wiring and whisper, "Dad, they will be strong like you said." He would smile, and sometimes she would ask questions that made him pause. She was learning to not just about machines, but about the choices that carry weight. He saw her carrying the same quiet heart she had drawn in the beginning beneath the ship. She was the reason he had asked for the program, and the reason he kept it honest. Marissa's support stayed quiet at first. There were no public announcements, no staged photos of her with a local hero. She gave a few introductions real, ones bringing in a small local marina that agreed to send their tired young workers to the training. She arranged the first small grant that helped the program pay for a basic space rental and more tools. Her people checked in, not to control the story, but to stay sure the plan stayed honest. Sometimes Marcus would get a short message. How? Are the first 3 doing? Or any problems we can help with quietly? The questions came like the kind you ask when you want something to grow, and you understand that too. Much light can burn a seed. The day of the small graduation came. It was not a big fancy event. It was held in the little room above the shop where the training happened. Marcus had made small certificates, simple paper with the program's name, the names of the graduates, and a line that read, "For learning to see what others missed." The 3 men stood nervous and proud. They had fixed real systems for the community. They had earned their first referrals. Marcus had asked them each to share something they had learned about trust. One man said, "It's not the tools. It's showing up when the problem is ugly." Another said, "It's the quiet voice that tells me I can do it." The third, a young woman who had never held a ratchet before, said, "It's the way he made me believe the machine was talking to me and I could answer." Olea sat in the corner, drawing small stars next to their names. She had made tiny hand-drawn medals for each of them, giving one to Marcus and whispering, "You did it, Daddy." Marcus stood to give the small talk he had been practicing. For days, he didn't make it about himself. He talked about the first time he had seen an engine glow the right way after fixing it, and the feeling that came when you knew you didn't break it by accident, you made it right. He told the group that the real test would be what they did after the certificates, how they treated the next person coming in with broken pride. Tired hands and a story no one believed. They all laughed quietly, and the room warmed. Door opened, and Marcus saw her standing there. Marissa was not in a dress made for cameras. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, nothing flashy. Her hair was pulled back. She stood a little to the side, not stepping forward immediately, like she didn't want to pull the light, but she also did not want to hide. The small group paused, the kind of silence that is not awkward but full. Would come. He looked at her, then back at the graduates. She didn't come up and stand in the middle. She sat at the back, quiet, watching like someone who had learned to listen more than speak. Marcus kept going with his talk. He didn't change what he was saying, he finished, then called each of the three forward. He handed them their certificates and the hand-drawn medals from Aaliyah, and he spoke their names with the care that made them feel seen. When the last one stepped down, the room broke just a little. One of the new graduates looked up, catching Maurice's eye, and lifted his certificate like a small flag.
Ow!
She nodded just once. It was not a showy approval. It was a real one, her eyes holding the quiet weight of someone who had watched a door open and had helped widen it. After the short ceremony, the small group gathered around the chipped table with cups of cheap coffee that someone had brought. Marcus walked toward her slowly. She stood when he came near, not with the distance of power, but with something softer. "They did well," she said. Her voice was quiet. He hadn't expected a big speech. He didn't want one. You built something, she added. You kept it honest. He looked at her. You helped. That made it easier to build. She gave a small smile, the kind that was not for cameras. Then she added, I saw the way they looked at you. That's the real change, not the certificates. He nodded. He could have asked for more funding, more referrals, a story that would move their program faster. Instead, he said, they need time to prove it, then others will come. How trust grows. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small envelope, and placed it on the table. This is for the next group, she said. Use it where it matters most, not for something that glitters, for tools, and for the people who are not sure they belong yet. Marcus opened it later. Inside was enough to buy more good parts and pay for another 3 tests. It wasn't a big public gesture. It was the kind that kept a program growing when no one was watching. Aaliyah came over and hugged Marcus around the waist. She looked at Marissa for a second, then whispered, thank you. Marissa gave a tiny nod and met the girl's eyes. Keep drawing, she said softly. The heart matters. Aaliyah grinned. Idalia grinned. The bridge had stretched farther than he first imagined. It wasn't just a program now. It was a small community that had proof. A rich woman who had laughed and then listened. A man who had asked for something real. It's the people who had learned and would now pass it on. It's a girl who believed the heart under the ship was the real engine. Later, when the graduation quieted, Marissa and Marcus stood outside by the small steps. The sun was low, turning the water into soft gold. She said, I didn't want a story that made me look good. I wanted to see if you'd build it without the lights. He answered, you gave me a door, I walked through. Then I held. It opened for others. She hesitated, then added, I've watched how people in my world move. Some push money in front and call it help. You asked. You gave a plan. That was the difference. Marcus didn't say I told you. He only said it's working. She looked out at the water, then back at him, then keep building. I'll keep watching. Quietly, he nodded. He knew she meant it. The story did not end with one graduation. The Hidden Hands program grew slowly, the way roots spread, not loud, not immediate, but strong under the surface. Marissa became a quiet part of it, showing up sometimes without announcement, asking how things were going, offering a small suggestion that helped the next group avoid a mistake. Marcus kept teaching. The men and women who went through the program began to tell others, not in big speeches, but with the kind of quiet recommendation that said, go. They will help you see under the surface. Aaliyah grew with it all. She kept drawing, adding new details to the heart wires, hands, small lights, and people standing beside the ship. Marcus pinned her newest picture on the wall by the tools, where anyone who came in could see it. Would tell new students, that's the heart. That's why we do it. They might laugh at you first, but if you bring what's real, they might open a door. Then you build the bridge for others. He still remembered the day he went to fix the yacht. He remembered the laugh, the pause, the choice she made when she asked for his card, and the line she said that day. Don't let them laugh before they see. Now the laugh had changed. It wasn't from her anymore. It came from neighbors. Watching the new graduates walk bold into jobs, from students telling their kids that learning a skill could change a life. And from Marcus when he saw Alia's heart drawing grow bigger on the wall. The real strength had been below the surface. All along, the yacht had been the start. The work that followed had become the real story.